Hey, welcome to Fitzdog Radio. It's a beautiful day. Played golf today. Playing a lot of golf lately, not getting any better. Golf is it's a tease because you go out with your good friends and there's no cell phones. Nobody's on a cell phone the entire time. And you're in nature and it's beautiful. And then you have to do a thing called playing golf, which makes you fucking miserable. It lures you in, and then you get frustrated, then you get angry, then you get apathetic. You lose money. But I do it every week. Every week I go out, same bunch of guys. It's fun. As you know, I lost my wedding ring on the golf course a couple weeks ago. Found it, thank God. Restored my marriage. And then this past week, I didn't lose my wallet. It got stolen out of my car. I left my wallet in my car because I can't sit down with my wallet in my back pocket. It hurts my ass. So I take it out and I put it on the console. And then I forgot about it. Didn't lock my car. The next morning, I get a text from my neighbor saying, I found your wallet. Found it. It's empty. But I got your wallet. It's got a credit card in it. So I go get it, and then I come back and I look on my lawn, and somebody had thrown all of my credit cards and driver's license wrapped up in a rubber band, and they had thrown it over the fence. So literally, except for the cash, I got everything back in my wallet. This is it. This is ADHD, and I have it bad. I lose in my life. I have probably lost 25 wallets. I've lost a dozen sets of keys, phones. I've lost everything. My life is more difficult than your life. Ugh. But anyway, I mean, you just think about like your wallet. It's so personal. You know, I had all these different credit cards. Well, I don't remember which ones I have. Like, I can't just start canceling. I never made a list. I should have a spreadsheet of every credit card and the number you call to cancel it, and I don't. And then on top of it, my biggest worry first thing I thought of is the millennial car wash, multiple punch, free car wash, whatever you call it. You know, you get a punch card. I had fucking 10 punches. Next one's free. And it got returned to me. That was huge. You know, whatever. It's a $16 car wash, but it means I earned it. I spent some time, and I earned it. Spend way too much time on TikTok. I can say that every day of my life. It is absolutely haunting how perfect it is, how it responds to all of your needs, it gives you these little drops of what do they call it? The stuff that makes you happy. Endorphins. Little endorphin drops. One by one. Just keeps giving them to you. And it's like, I tried to delete it. I was spending 2 hours a day on it. So I deleted it, re-downloaded it 24 hours later. I could not live without my shark attacks and redneck chicks crashing motorbikes into their trailers, sharks attacking surfers. Sometimes they would attack a canoe. Guys on a canoe, fucking great white shark bites them. Yes! Yes! Hockey fights. Badass hockey fights from the 80s when guys fucking went at it. Refs got the fuck out of the way. Good stand-up clips, like the best clips of Bill Hicks, Louie C.K., I mean, it's like it customizes, it learns what you like, and it keeps giving it to you. It's like a perfect relationship. Oh, my whole family's addicted. Everybody watches it. And now Donald Trump, is going to cancel it in 45 days, 44 now. I'm counting. He's going to cancel TikTok. Why? Because they were responsible for a low audience turnout at one of his events, apparently. They can have it. I don't care if it's a security risk. They can take my fucking social security number, whatever it costs. I'll pay it to continue watching girls with no bras doing yoga, to continue watching a dog and a chicken cuddle. Huh? Like they love each other. Oh. Anyway. Crazy week. It was a gun week this week. We went to my nephew, Rowan, who I've talked about on the podcast, is staying with us. South African. He went out for the he renounced his South African citizenship because he wanted to become a Navy SEAL. So he joined the Navy. You have to join the Navy, and then you go out for the program. And he got a cunt hair away from being an actual Navy SEAL. So anyway, he's really into guns. We got guns in the house, which I've never had before. And so he goes, let me take you guys shooting. So he takes us to the range, and it was crazy. There's a line to get in. There's a line around the block to get in. And it's people all carrying guns, and they're the people you don't want to see with guns. There's loners. A lot of people alone, like basement dwellers, gangbangers, a scrawny guy. There was a scrawny guy, and I watched him. He was at the range next to us, and they give you different things, different targets, paper targets. One of them is a guy with his arm around the neck of a girl, and he's got a gun to her head, and you're meant to shoot his head and his shoulder. The scrawny loner was only shooting at the woman's head. And I wanted to call the police and say, let's keep an eye on this guy. Do we have a tracking device? Can we take his gun away? This guy's not right. He was alone. It's one thing if you're with some friends and as a joke, you shoot the woman. He's fucking alone. Yeah. And by the way, not fucking easy to shoot a handgun. I had a 45, and then I had another one that was called a Springfield something. But the 45 is pretty heavy, and it's got a little bit of kick. And I'm telling you, it ain't easy to hit the target. The target was about, what did he tell me? I mean, it couldn't have been more than 12, 15 feet from me. And I was missing. I was missing the fucking target. I got some in, but I was shocked at how difficult it was. My daughter fucking lit it up. She was hitting bullseyes. It's like, where the fuck did you learn how to do that? But, you realize you watch the movies when a guy just grabs a gun and starts shooting people and hitting everybody in the... No, it's not that fucking easy. So anyway, then we go... the next day, I get the BB gun. My friend is from Texas, and she gave me a BB gun for my 50th birthday. She said, you're old enough now that you should have a gun. So she gave me a BB gun. I never use it. And I pull it out, and me and my nephew are fucking around. We're shooting some tin cans. And then I said, let's shoot each other in the ass. So I pumped it up like 3 times, and I shot him in the ass, and he didn't even fucking flinch. And so I was like, all right, do it to me. And I think he pumped it like 4 times, and he shot me in the ass, and it fucking hurt. It stung, and then it stung more, and then it stung a little more after that. And it left a welt that turned into a bruise. Didn't break the skin, but a welt turned to a bruise. If you want to see it, you can go to my Instagram page. I posted him shooting me. And then we're shooting cans. This is so crazy. In the backyard, and I put a couple towels up on the fence behind where we were shooting the cans. We put the cans on the hot tub, and we were shooting into the towels. And the next day, I get a text from my neighbor saying, do you have a BB gun? And then a picture of his son's window with a bullet hole in it. And I was like, fuck. I felt like I was 9 years old again, and I was in trouble. I was like, holy shit. This is, as a homeowner, this is like one of the worst things you can do to your neighbor. Shooting through his fucking window. And so, like, there's that initial instinct is, should I lie? You know, should I say I have no idea? But I wasn't gonna do that. Of course I'm gonna tell him. But I did think that for a second. And then and so I told him, of course, I go, we did it. I'm so sorry, and let me come over. So I came over his house, and he's got 2 boys, and he's got a house out in the country that they go to a lot. So I brought the gun with me, and I said, here, you take it. The Fitzsimmons family, we're white trash. We shouldn't have a gun. Bad things will happen. You take it out to the country, have some fun with it. I apologized, offered to pay for the window, and anyway, I'm such a fucking idiot. And by the way, if I'd lied, he would have known, because he was like, hey, yeah, I saw that Instagram video of you getting shot in the ass with a BB gun yesterday. So I would have been busted. Anyway, busy week. So many fucking people texting me and hitting me on Twitter about, I worked for Ellen DeGeneres for a couple years. I might have picked up some hardware while I was there. Might have picked up 4 Emmys. Sent one to my mom. But it was, I don't comment on the experience because I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But it is amazing how much people want the fall. I just realized the nicer somebody projects themselves, the more people want to know they're mean, and the more they enjoy watching the fall. And this is a pretty big fall. And so I don't know what it is. It's just like, people are like, I thought you were nice. Like, I thought you were nice. Like, none of us are nice. And you told us you were nice. And then we found out you're mean, and now I fucking hate you. People hate her. And it's like, because I think it's okay to not be a nice person, but it's not okay to be a couple different people. And that nothing makes people angrier than to think you're projecting one thing, and then, what do they call it? Kissing up and pissing down, treating people above you and below you different. And so, that's how people seem to feel about her. They seem to think that it's not that she's a nice person who is overwhelmed and stressed and so sometimes acts mean. I think the default is, no, she's a horrible, mean person who pretends to be nice. That's, if somebody's half and half, that's the default setting. I don't know. I don't have a comment on it. But I did do a video about it on Instagram with Mike on Sunday Papers. By the way, if you're not watching the Sunday Papers podcast, you're missing out on, it's blowing up. It's getting big. We're getting more people every week listening and watching it on YouTube. Check it out. I think you'll like it. And also Childish, my podcast Childish with Allison Rosen. Going for about a year and a half. All right, let's talk about this. You remember I told you about my mom, and she's locked in my sister's basement, and she told me that she has seen everything on Netflix. And my sister won't buy her HBO. I don't know why. It's very dysfunctional. But she's down in the basement, she's run out of shit. And here's the solution. There's a thing called the VPN private internet access. And with it, I'm getting it for her. I will be the son of the year. With VPN, you bypass all those geo restrictions streaming services have in place, because even if you pay for a subscription for like Netflix or whatever channels, you're only getting the American version of it. People in Japan have access to more content than we do here in the States. In Europe, they have a lot of series that we can't get. So not anymore. Now with private internet access, it only takes one click to change your IP address and make it look like you're in a different country and enjoy everything available there. And it's not all about entertainment. With private access, internet access, you can hide your IP address, encrypt your connection, and keep everything you do online to yourself, because there's no logging whatsoever with PIA. Private internet access has been on the market since 2010. Over 30 million people use their apps. Their PC Magazine's Editor Choice Award, and they gave it to me, and I did it, and it's fucking phenomenal. You can watch. My son is into soccer, and we watched some local. What's his team? I forget which team it was, but we found it and watched it. They have apps for all the major operating systems, over 2,600 VPN servers in 47 countries. One subscription protects up to 10 devices simultaneously, and there's even a 30-day money-back guarantee. Try it. It's 30 days, and it's like $3 a month. If you want to keep yourself safe and entertained online, Private Internet Access has a special deal for you. You get a 2-year subscription at a 77% discount with 3 extra months added for free. That's less than $3 a month for complete digital privacy. Head to privateinternetaccess.com/Fitzdog now to get started. privateinternetaccess.com/Fitzdog. Enjoy. Let me know if you have a great experience with it also. I'd love to hear from you about it. I do hear from you. This is a note from a guy named Robert DeBon, who's very concerned about my bidet use. He says, when you use the bidet, scoot forward. Lift your balls onto the seat. Don't aim with the spout. Move your body to aim. So I tried it. I said, fuck it. Because I've complained that I'm using twice as much toilet paper because my asshole, taint, and balls are all soaked by the end of it. And I got to get big wads of toilet paper, pat everything down. And so I tried it. I sat down, took a dump, and then I put my balls on the seat. I don't want to get gross, but let's just say the seat was not clean after that. There were droplets. So that's a fucking deal killer right there. I'm not going to leave urine on the seat and then have to fucking wipe it. And it didn't even work that much. I still had too much. I think I'm done with the bidet. I'm not sure. This is a segment. You know, I never named this segment, but for months now, people have been sending in their colloquialisms, their sayings that their parents or their grandparents say, and stuff that I don't want these phrases and expressions to die because they're colorful. They make me laugh. They make life a more colorful place. So I think I'm going to call the segment "Say What?" And I'm going to need an audio clip for that. If anybody can send me "Say What?" then we're going to use that from now on in the podcast. So please send that in. fitzdog@gmail.com for all of these things. This comes from Aylin Fell from Ireland. He said, I thought you might like some of these Irishisms for being drunk. He made a list. Langured, polluted, in a hoop, ossified, plastered, scuttered, pissed. That's a big one over there. Locked, blutered, paralytic. I remember being in Ireland hearing that a lot. He's fucking paralytic. Flustered, balubus, twisted, and banjoed. Damn. You know they drink a lot when they got fucking a dozen different excellent words for it. We used to say, when I was a teenager, we would say, he was zooted. Dude, he was zooty zoot. He was zoot. And then we had, everybody had their own vegetable name. Like one guy was broccoli. I was rutabaga. Like when you were super high and you were just a vegetable and you couldn't speak, then people only called you by your vegetable name. I thought rutabaga was, I drew a good one. This one comes from Andrew Armida. One of my dad's go-tos whenever he's telling a story and it involves somebody who's acting confused, he'll describe the person by saying, quote, "This guy's standing here and he doesn't know whether to shit or wind his watch." Well, that's a good one because nobody winds their watch anymore. And it actually, it reminded me that, yeah, my first watches, you had to fucking wind them. Every day you had to remember to wind your watch or it stopped. Isn't that insane? And that's how it was for fucking hundreds of years. Did Jesus have a watch? No. This guy Bodes says he's got a couple of these from his granddad, who was English. I'm so hungry I could eat the ass off a low-flying duck. Yeah. That takes some vertical leap, some strong jaws. But if you're hungry enough, you're about as useful as a chocolate teapot. When someone asks if you want a drink, well, I'm not here to fuck spiders. That sounds like something out of Deadwood, my series. If you're not watching Deadwood, if you haven't watched it, everybody always says I watched a couple episodes, but I couldn't get into it. Get into it. Just fucking get into it. It's Shakespeare. It's literally, it's not like, hey, it's kind of like Shakespeare. No, it's Shakespeare. It's written in almost like a Shakespearean meter. And people do monologues, and he's got a head that he talks to, which I think is, what was it, Alas Eurus? Whatever it was. There was a character, maybe it was Othello, who had a head that he talked to. Anyway, my guest, we've gotten to it. Finished my little intro. Now we get to have a nice hour with a guy who is a hero of mine. He was a mentor for me. He is literally one of the reasons I professionally went into comedy. He gave me the confidence and the inspiration that I could do it when I was about 16 years old. He knew my dad from the Friars Club, and I'll always be grateful to him. And also, just he's a guy who was on SNL. He was like one of the first writers hired on SNL. He's responsible for like a lot of the Belushi stuff, the Samurai, and everything Gilda Radner ever did, a lot of the early Weekend Update jokes. He was a powerhouse, and he's gone on to, he created It's the Gary Shandling Show and a million other things. He writes on Curb Your Enthusiasm. So we talked. He was in his place in New York or New Jersey. I was here in Venice Beach, and we spoke. And here it is, the great Alan Zweibel. Welcome to Fitzdog Radio. I am so excited and honored to have my next guest on. He's an old friend and a mentor, and a guy who I can honestly say is very responsible for me going into comedy. He did a short mentorship for me when I was a teenager. And I've loved him ever since. Alan Zweibel, welcome.
Thanks so much, Greg. Good to see you again.
It's great. It's been a lot of years. My God.
I can't, I was trying to figure it out. Was it before It's Gary Shandling Show, which would have been late 80s? Was it in the 90s? I couldn't pinpoint it. I was actually trying to figure out.
Probably before It's Gary Shandling Show. When I met you, just to give people the back history of it, when I was a kid, my father was a big member of the Friars Club. He was the scribe, so he was the guy that wrote the letter in the monthly missal, and he was a guy who got to know you because you were a big friar back then.
I loved the club back then, and I think of your dad often, because that club is hardly the same as it was. And your dad was a great guy, and I hate to use this expression, but a true friar. He represented everything good about that club, all right? He was a great guy. He was approachable. He cared about the place. He was so nice to everybody, and he was just a mensch. And so when I look at what the club is going through these days and what has happened, I just imagine friars back then, including your dad, going, oh, my God, they wouldn't recognize it,
Right. That's so sad. Yeah, I know there's some legal battles. There was some embezzlement going on.
Sexual harassment suits. There was all sorts of ugly things that fill tabloids and it's just, as the kids say, icky.
Well, it's icky, and especially for people like me and you, but where it is so ingrained in our hearts and our relationship to comedy. And your book, which is called Laugh Lines: My Life Helping Funny People Be Funnier. You talk a lot about the Friars Club and how it was the first one of the first places you felt like you were in show business when you went there as a young writer.
I was taken there by Morty Gunty and Freddie Roman and Dick Capri, Catskill comedians.
The best.
That I was selling jokes to for $7 a line. That was the going rate at the time. And they would take me to the Friars Club. And I remember the first time I told my parents, wow, I'm going to go to the Friars Club. And my father, as far as he was concerned, I had arrived. It was the mecca of show business, you know.
It's like an Irish person being brought to the Kennedy compound.
yeah, I'm going to Hyannisport, Dad.
Right.
It was exactly like that.
Yeah.
And it was a fun place. The bar was a lot of fun. There were comics there. And there were just, and the people who weren't comics, there was just it was this wonderful fraternity. It was steeped in what it was meant to be. It was just, it's not that only that it was show business. It was a feeling of, brotherhood. It was nice.
It was brotherhood, and it was a place where even though business was being done, it was being done in a funny way. It was really like, it was ball busting, but at the same time, that Jewish ball busting, which is so New York, which is, you give somebody a shot, and then there's "I love you" at the end of it. It's so effusive, and my father, I think, found his way in as a niche because he was the Irish guy. He was the token Irish guy.
He was the token Irish guy, but his spirit blended in perfectly. And like I said, there was something quintessential about your dad's personality and his values that. He was honorary Jewish. You know what I mean? We let him into the tribe. Right. And, and you're absolutely right. Business was done there, but it was not blatant. It wasn't like table hopping for the sake of people gave out business cards or anything like that. There were a ton of comedians, and there were a ton of people who could book the comedians, but it was done with a certain sort of... oh, gee, maybe if I made him laugh, he'll let me do the Concord on Wednesday
Exactly.
night.
Right, right. And it was, do you remember Ruth Stern?
Oh, my God, yes.
She was a monster. God. She used to book comedy rooms, and God bless her. She loved comedians, and she did good by comedians. She got them a lot of work, but she was rough. She was rough on you.
Oh, she was this, are we allowed to say large woman?
Big girl.
And, with sort of like this red hair, a beehive kind of thing. Yeah. And she was, Stern. Her last name was Stern. And that's exactly what she was. It was her last name was an adjective for her, you know?
Yeah. And as a young comic, and I started going there. Well, let me back up a little bit because when I was in high school, I was given this, I think it was called Intercession. And it was during your senior year. And they gave you a quarter of the year was dedicated to you doing whatever you thought you might want to do for a living in life. It was a great opportunity in high school. Very smart idea. And at the time I thought I want to be a comedy writer. And it was because I'd grown up watching Saturday Night Live, and I'd grown up watching all the great comics doing, and Friars, guys like Alan King going on The Tonight Show and doing stand-up. And so I talked to my dad about it, and I said, is there any way you can help me out? And he put me in touch with you. And I just could not believe it. I couldn't believe that you would have the grace and the generosity to take a high school kid and not just meet with me once, but like you read my scripts and you gave me notes on them, and you brought me to parties. You brought me to a party at, oh God, what was the guy's name? Bruce Fierstein?
Oh, wow. The guy who wrote, at the time, he had just written Real Men Don't Eat Quiche, which was a huge book.
It was a huge book, and I think he might have written for SNL briefly because there was a bunch of SNL people at his apartment for a party, and he brought me to it, and Gilda Radner was there, And I looked like I was about 14 at the time. And she just, because you introduced me to her and you gave me a nice intro, she stayed with me all night and kept teasing me for looking young. And she started playing this grandmother character and telling me I should go to bed. And it was like, I just couldn't believe it. And it was Brian Doyle Murray, I think, was there. And,
I seem to remember that party, oddly enough. My God. I had met Bruce Fierstein through Gilda because Bruce was co-writing a script with Gene Wilder, who was Gilda's husband.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were married at the time, but they were certainly a couple. That's how I met Bruce. Bruce later went on to write James Bond movies, has done very well for himself. But I vaguely remember that party and so long ago. But yeah, I mean, Gilda made fun of everybody lovingly, and the fact that you look prepubescent, you were just ripe for her to go after you.
Yeah, but I mean, I gotta really thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, don't be silly, you bet.
It absolutely gave me the confidence by you saying some nice things to me about my writing that I could maybe do this for a living, and it sent me off to college as an English major where I started doing comedy while I was in college, and I don't think I would have taken that brave step. So, from my heart, thank you so much for doing that.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
So tell me about these parties, because, you were at SNL. If people don't know, you were like one of the first writers hired for the show.
I was one of the original writers. I was there from 75 to 80 with the original group.
And what were the party? Were there a lot of those parties? Was it just constant going out? I mean, you were working late probably most nights, but what was it like in the social scene for you guys?
Well, the parties were the after parties after the show on Saturday nights, which were, the show ended at 1, and by the time you got to the restaurant or wherever it was 1:30, and they went for a few hours. And then on off weeks, look, there were parties I remember at Al Franken would have a party at his apartment. He would just open it up on a Sunday afternoon, the night after a show, the day after a show. Robin, my wife, who I met, she was a production assistant on the show. We threw a party the week before our wedding. There's a place that's still open downtown in New York called Sammy's Romanian Restaurant.
Oh, of course, yeah, with the chicken liver on the table and
a bottle of seltzer.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, it was. Anybody who was unable to come to the actual wedding the week later at the temple, including Gilda. We had written, me and a bunch of other writers had written a one-person show for her. It opened on Broadway, and now she was doing it out of town. And as it worked out, the Saturday night of the actual wedding, she was going to be in Chicago doing the show. So we rented out Sammy's Romanian Restaurant. Everyone from the show came, Simon and Garfunkel. I mean, it was lots of fun, and it was just great. But it was very much because of Gilda, so she could celebrate with us because she couldn't be there the following week. So that was and there were seders, that Robin, by and large, organized, and they were mostly for people. If Passover came out during a work week, during a show week, and people couldn't go home, fly home to wherever their families were, we had seders. So there was a lot of parties. The work was, as I'm positive it is today, it's 24/7, and you look for those moments to unwind.
Yeah, because it sounded like in the book, it sounded like you would work with Gilda, and then first let me talk about the I think the greatest scene in the book was the first time the cast assembled in Lauren's office. And you came in and you were so nervous that you set yourself up behind a potted plant.
Yeah.
And she was nervous too. And so she kind of approached you. And meanwhile, John Belushi's sitting there, and Dan Aykroyd, and Chevy Chase.
And Al Franken and Lorraine Newman. I had never... look, I was a joke writer for those Catskill comics, right? So I get hired for this new show. I go into the office, and it was the first meeting of the writers and the actors. And I'm looking around, and those people that you're talking about are creating scenes and characters, just improving stuff, waiting for the meeting to begin. And it was a kind of comedy that I had never written for before. Okay, I was writing for guys with tuxedos and and dentures who were telling wife jokes. Yeah. And here I'm seeing stuff being created before my eyes. I had never heard of Second City. Yeah. I learned about it. Okay, I had never heard of the Groundlings in these improv places. And I got a little overwhelmed, and I didn't want to be in the line of fire. So, yeah, I hid behind a plant. Gilda also was nervous. Not that she couldn't have held her own with those people, which she did, but it was her first TV show. She was new to New York. She was born in Detroit, came here by way of Toronto, where she was in Second City, and probably took pity on this large Jewish guy squatting behind the plant. So she joined me behind there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And then it was just, it seems like at SNL, it is about a writer and a performer. Are there other examples of that where certain writers and performers kind of locked in together and supported each other?
Well, if you look at, a lot of the Will Ferrell's movies, Adam McKay wrote them, and that came years after I was there, much later after I was here. When I was there, you had Brian Doyle Murray, who you just mentioned, who co-wrote Caddyshack. Bill Murray was in it, and I don't know when they started the process of writing that script, but people have an affinity. I ended up writing with Dan Aykroyd a movie called Dragnet because you couldn't find two people whose sensibilities were different. I was me, a joke writer, and I learned how to write sketches and create characters and whatever, but you got Dan, this Canadian who can talk to you with total earnest how to take apart an engine and put it back together again, which was so far from my sensibility. So he asked me to come and write Dragnet with him. So yes, in answer to your question, a lot of associations were made that way. Years later, I'm sure Tina Fey had people she liked writing with and who came and wrote for, whether it be 30 Rock or any of her other shows. So yeah, it's sort of a natural thing to happen where you get two people who are writing for one person. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right,
and I later did it with Gary Shandling. When I co-created It's Gary Shandling Show, Gary and I were introduced and we hit it off. And I explain in the book these writing relationships. When you're writing with somebody for that person, with me, it's been with Billy Crystal, Martin Short, Dave Barry. I've been really lucky to have some very, very successful collaborations. But there's a sensibility that you both have that attract you to each other. You make each other laugh. But there may be 10% difference between the way you think and the way I think. And it's that 10% where the alchemy is such that you create something that neither one of you could have done alone.
Right.
You both bring something different to it, in addition to whatever's similar about you. So yeah, those are really, really fun.
And it sounds like you had that with Billy Crystal as well, who I had no idea you did stand-up till I read your book, and that you and Billy were riding together from Long Island into the city and doing bits together. And how many years later do you end up working on his, what's it called, 700 Sundays?
700 Sundays. What had happened was I got tired of writing for those Catskill guys. They were twice my age. I took the jokes they wouldn't buy from me, and there were two clubs in New York, as you know, Catch a Rising Star in the improvisation, where Robert Klein and David Brenner and Lily Tomlin, my friend Larry David, they were all coming through. That was the new Catskills. That was the breeding grounds.
Right.
So the plan was to go on stage, deliver those jokes with the hopes that somebody would like the material and want to represent me. And the first week that I'm there, in addition to Larry David, I met Billy Crystal, who was just starting out as a single performer. He had been a part of a trio. And he lived about 4 or 5 towns over from where my parents lived. I moved back in with my parents after college. He was married with a kid. He would pick me up every night in his little blue Volkswagen. We'd drive into the city. We'd do our jokes. And on the way back, we'd listen to the cassettes and critique each other.
Yeah.
And that's how we both started together. And then I want to say that was 74. And he was still my best friend, especially when we moved to California. And but we never worked together. We just, he was over the house all the time. He's Uncle Billy to the kids and all of that. And then in 99, which would have made it 25 years, he asked me if I would co-write a play, a one-man show called 700 Sundays, which won a Tony. We did it together. It won a Tony. It was glorious. But what was mostly glorious about it was that 700 Sundays, for anybody who doesn't know what the title means, his dad worked a few jobs. He worked 6 days a week. Sundays was their day to be together. And his dad died suddenly when Billy was 15. So Billy calculated that he had roughly 700 Sundays with his father, okay? Yeah. Hence the title. And so the show was about his father, his mother, his extended family, none of whom I had met, okay? But he trusted me putting words in their mouths, you know what I mean? And for me, it was I was honored that he knew that I would be careful with them and I would have a respect for them. And writing for them wasn't that hard. I mean, look, he's a Jew from Long Island. I'm a Jew from Long. It's not like these were Martians. You know what I mean?
There's a shared language. Right.
There's a shared language, and as we said in 700 Sundays, we all have the same family. They just jump from album to album, And then, so let's say that was 90. The show opened on Broadway 2004-ish, won a Tony, and we just completed. 15 years later, 16 years later, we wrote a movie together called Here Today. Billy directed it. Billy stars in it with Tiffany Haddish. And I've seen the movie. It's really pretty terrific.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and we're just waiting for a release date. It was supposed
But you don't know if it'll be in the theaters or just on video on demand at this point?
That's what absolutely right, Greg. What had happened was it was supposed to be in the Cannes Film Festival. That got canceled, okay? Telluride, that got canceled. And now it's just a matter of, okay, are we going to wait for theaters?
Yeah.
Or is it going to go straight to some streaming service? And, look, there were test screenings of it before COVID. Okay, even with temporary music and without loop lines and whatever. And I saw 400 people laugh and then cry. So you go, wow,
that's great.
That's a communal thing. So that's the optimal way to see a movie like this. But it's a different world right now, so we'll see exactly.
Well, Tiffany's fantastic, first of all. I've known her since she was a teenager. And she's
I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, at the Laugh Factory, she was kind of taken under the wing of the owner of the Laugh Factory, Jamie Masada. She started out in a comedy camp when she was like an orphan. Not an orphan, but basically an orphan. I think she didn't have her parents around anymore. She was like practically living in the streets. And then she got exposed to comedy when she was about, I think, like 14 years old through this camp.
I read her autobiography before we started shooting.
Oh,
so
you did?
I know about the Forster homes. Yeah, I know about that rough background. You bet.
Right. So, but I mean, it sounds like a lot of comedies are doing well on video. I know Judd Apatow put out that King of Staten Island.
Oh, absolutely.
And it did very well.
This may be the fate of our movie, which is just fine. You know what I mean? Like I said, we were spoiled seeing 400 people laugh and cry together, but this is the world we live in now, and this is a decision that will be made by the studio, not me. So I'm waiting for a phone call to find out what's happening,
So let's talk about. I'm very close to Judd. I wrote on Crashing, and then we take walks together now during the pandemic, and your name came up. He loves you. So talk about your relationship to Judd a little bit, because you guys, I guess, met on Gary Shandling's show, or was it before that?
No, I'll tell you when Judd and I met. We were moving about 10 years ago from LA back east, okay? So we're going through boxes and file cabinets. What are we going to ship with us? What's garbage? What are we going to throw out? And my wife, Robin, finds a typewritten letter that's got these call letters for a radio station.
Yeah.
And it's dated 1983. And it says, "Dear Mr. Zweibel, the letter thanked me for taking the train from Penn Station out to Syosset, Long Island, to be on this kid's radio show. Supposedly there was a snowstorm. Supposedly in the letter, I opened the door for other SNL people like Gilda and like Michael O'Donoghue to be on his show. And he closed off by thanking me for being so nice, and that if he ever makes it, he's going to be nice too." And I read the letter, and it says, "Sincerely," and is like a 15 or 16-year-old kid's signature, "Judd Apatow." Okay, that's when I met Judd. Do I remember it? Not specifically, because I would do things like that. And then he insists that he came over our apartment, and I'm sure he did, and because he told us what the furniture looked like, what pictures were where, and all of that. And we actually met years later, okay? Now when he's on his way to becoming Judd, I did It's Gary Shandling's show. He was on Larry Sanders. So our paths didn't cross there. Where they crossed was at Gary Shandling's basketball games.
Oh,
okay,
you
Gary
played
had
in those
these
games,
legendary.
those famous games?
I played in those games when we lived out there.
Wow.
And as a matter of fact, when I was interviewing Judd for this book, Laugh Lines, first of all, I told him about the letter and I asked for permission to reprint it in the book. He said, of course he can do it. He says, do me a favor, just take a picture of it. I want to see what I said. So I took a picture, I sent it to him, and he called me back, and he was talking, he says, my God, was I a kiss ass or what? Okay. And when I was talking to him about, we have Gary in common, okay? Aside from everything else,
yeah.
Gary was a nexus in that he had, Gary was a peer of mine, but I guess with Judd, age-wise and whatever, there was almost a father and son thing going on. When Gary passed, Judd asked me to speak at the memorial, and we flew out there so I could do that. I eulogized him. And when I interviewed him for the book, just about the basketball games and about Gary and whatever other questions I had for him, he was still shooting King of Staten Island. So he wanted to do it on the phone instead of, taking a test, with written questions and answers. I said, tell me about the basketball games. And he said, you bastard. He said, you dislocated my shoulder. Because and the reason I asked him about it was
Judd played in those basketball games?
Yeah. Not only did Judd play in those basketball games, because I had spoken to Franken, and Franken insisted in one of those games I broke his thumb. I said, Jesus, I knew that I made up for my lack of basketball ability by being big and hulking and like ripping down, rebounds and stuff. Franken said I broke his thumb, and I said to Judd, just sort of innocently, do you remember me being a bully out there or being physical? He said, you dislocated my shoulder. He said, to this day, whenever I put my shirt on, I think of you because one arm is longer than the other. And I would imagine Judd wears a lot of shirts. So, and so he and I, as a matter of fact, on Thursday of this week, he and I are going to be in conversation for something called the Stryker Center here in New York.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. And I remember a million years ago him approaching me to write a letter of recommendation for a school in L.A. for his daughter, Maud. There's a lot of stuff where we've intersect. Yes, indeed.
But you were a mensch. You were really very giving to young people coming up. That's, I think maybe because you knew from such a young age that it was what you wanted to do, that maybe you felt something for people trying. But yeah, it meant a lot to me. And my other mentor at that time was Freddie Roman, who my dad also introduced me to. And at the same time, I was meeting with you. Freddie would take me up to the Concord Hotel, and I would watch him perform. And he would do little references to me during his act. And I remember being like 16 and being like, oh my God, Freddie Roman is talking to me from the stage. And he did a show one time you remember in Yonkers, there was the Westchester County Fair.
Sure.
Would have. So Freddie gets booked to do that. And the show is at like 3 p.m, and it's in August. And of course he shows up wearing a tuxedo and a bow tie. And so we get to the stands where he's supposed to be doing his show, and there's a bunch of bleachers, and there's maybe 75 people spread out over these giant bleachers. And I'm sitting there going, I just felt a knot in my stomach, like this is going to be the most painful, embarrassing thing in the world. So Freddie gets up there, no stage. He's standing on some grass with a mic stand, and he says to everybody, he goes, all right, everybody, here's what we're going to do. We're going to rework this a little bit. You guys, come on down. Hey, beautiful. I love the dress. I want to see that dress up close. And so he spends 5 minutes getting these people packed into an area right in front of him. And then he does his act, fucking destroys. And I took so many lessons from watching the professionals, not just him, but Dick Capri and Mousy Lawrence. These guys did comedy like you don't see today.
Well, it was interesting because Freddie was, and Dick Capri, they consummate professionals. They had a brand of humor that was appealing probably to the generation before, given the age difference. That said, they can go into any room in the country, kill. All right, I saw Freddie Roman. There was one night where, not unlike what you're talking about, he was appearing, I forgot the name of it. It might have been called a Downbeat, but I'm not sure. It was a nightclub downstairs in the Empire State Building. Okay? It was a commercial crowd, a dinner show kind of thing. I went with him, and he killed them, right?
Right.
We're in his car, and now he goes up to Catch a Rising Star, where the audience, by and large, were 30 years younger than the one he just did.
Right.
And he got on stage, and he killed there as well.
Yeah.
Okay? I just marveled. Yeah, there was some different jokes that were appealed to younger people, but at the same time, it was masterful how these guys could size up a room and play to it. And it didn't matter who you were and what your sensibilities were. You found them funny.
They had, they had the timing like you don't see that kind of timing anymore. That Borscht Belt timing was unbelievable. You could watch Dick Capri do the same joke 20 times. And on this word, this hand would be in this spot every time. And
Absolutely.
They never rushed. They were fucking cool. They might have been older guys in tuxedos. They were cool guys.
They were really cool guys.
Yeah.
They were, and when I went to SNL, which was interesting because it was, if that was the culture, SNL at the time was obviously the counterculture.
Yeah.
This was the sons and daughters of Alan King,
right.
The sons and daughters of Freddie Roman and Dick Capri and Morty Gunty. The logo, an early logo of SNL was Saturday Night Live spray painted on the outside wall of what was then called the RCA building, okay? So you had, as if it were graffiti. Do you know what I mean? So it was emblematic of, okay, now it's our turn. This is our sensibility. This is our turn to talk. That all being said, I maintained relationships with all of those guys, and I would still meet them at the Friars Club. I'd go to the bar. I wasn't selling jokes anymore, but I still had and have an appreciation for not only who they were, but what they did. And if you had a genealogical chart of what begat what comedy-wise, those guys, they filled an era. Before them, there was burlesque, then there was vaudeville and, radio and all that. And there was the nightclub, the cabaret life, you know what I mean? And they made thousands and thousands and thousands of people laugh. It was part of the culture changing. It was part of you know, my grandparents came over from Europe. My parents became suburbanites, and now they had something called leisure time. It was the American dream. And they used to go up to the Catskills for a holiday weekend or whatever and laugh.
Would you go up there as a kid to the Catskills?
Oh, they would take the whole family.
Yeah.
We'd go up on a Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, whatever it was. And the kick was, Greg, that I would sneak into the nightclubs where these same guys were performing because you had to be 18, I think.
Yeah.
I would sneak in and watch them perform.
Yeah.
So it was just like you're talking about Freddie Roman, you know, in that Westchester place. I would see these guys. I'd see Toady Fields. I'd see, you know, Buddy Hackett on a holiday weekend. I'd see these guys, and I saw what they did. Yeah. And I saw how they made people laugh and the control they had of the audience. And I mean that in a good way.
Yeah, they had control. And it was like you said, I mean, when you're doing the Catskills, you have a very shared cultural experience. You know, you can use some Yiddish, and you can talk about, like you said, it's different. You move from album to album. The families are very similar. But it was so specific that when they took that material and they did bring it somewhere else, it didn't matter that you shared in that template with them. You still laughed at the stories and the being brought into that world.
Absolutely. If you remember Myron Cohen, there was nobody more Jewish than him, but he made everybody laugh because it was about people. You know, it's like when Billy and I did 700 Sundays, for half a minute, there was the question, gee, do you have to be Jewish and from Long Island to appreciate it more, okay? Well, we took the show from Broadway and it went to Boston and Philly and Toronto and San Francisco and Atlanta, and everyone was laughing. And then the show went to Australia, where it's not in their culture to give standing ovations. They made an exception in this case. And
no kidding.
And then the lesson was that all you needed was a family. And even if it wasn't specifically your family, if you remember my big fat Greek wedding, right? You didn't have to be big fat or Greek to think it was a great move. You just needed a family. And what we do is subconsciously even relate to, oh, that's like my uncle so-and-so. That's like, and we do that subconsciously and hook in.
Right. And I think we get jealous of that other culture. You know, like I always had kind of a Jewish fetish from growing up and, you know, going to the Friars so much and seeing I think there was just a camaraderie. There was such a, you know, maybe it comes from being survivors of something horrible a generation before, but there was something that was so tight between Jewish people. And I loved that they had I loved the Yiddish. I loved the, you know, the different cultural points. And then I went to Boston University, the most Jewish college in America, dated nothing but Jewish girls because they would have sex with you much faster than the Irish girls that I grew up with.
Yeah, as I learned too. Okay.
So let's get more into the SNL part because this is just, I couldn't put the book down, by the way. It's just, I don't know if it's just me because it's my life, but it is so fascinating. And I've read other books about the inside of SNL, but this one capturing really the golden moments of the beginnings of it. And you guys not knowing when it started. You turned down a job on Hollywood Squares, which at the time was like the biggest stars in Hollywood. This was your ticket would be punched. Network show, gonna be on for years. And you turned it down to work with a bunch of completely unknown guys on a show that was on once a week, late at night on a Saturday. And what made you do that?
The instinct was, and you're right, on paper you go, okay, they were entering their 9th season, prime time, West Coast, higher pay scales, all these stars who are in the boxes had their own Las Vegas acts, they had their own variety shows. This would be a perfect entree into television. And here, who the hell is John Belushi?
Yeah.
11:30 to 1 on Saturday night. Who's watching TV? Just you know, angry people who didn't get laid.
Yeah, right.
So, but the instinct was, look, that's the reason I had sought other areas other than the Catskills. This was the sensibility of my peers. And even if it wasn't going to be a success, I wanted to be able to write about what my life experiences were, what made me laugh. And as much as I appreciated them, I was tired of writing jokes about paving the driveway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Nixon had resigned the year before. There was Woodstock. You know, there was it was Watergate. There was all this stuff, and the music was different. So I'm going, no, this is who I want to be with. This is so. That's why I say it was a half a second of consideration.
Yeah.
And well, the other thing was probably at the time, a calculated bet. This was like, well, Jesus, if I'm going to fail, let me fail doing something I want to do.
Yeah, because it sounds like you were feeling like you weren't able to be yourself for so many years as a writer. And then you wrote jokes that weren't fitting for these other guys. And you started doing them with stand-up, but it sounded like stand-up was not what you were going to stick with. But this is the joke. You gave like 1,100 pages to Lorne Michaels.
Well, it was 1,100 jokes, not
1,100 jokes. And this is the one that I think maybe got you the show, which was, and I think it was done on the first episode. The post office is about to issue a stamp commemorating prostitution in the United States. It's a 10-cent stamp. If you want to lick it, it's a quarter. It's just that perfect joke.
I go into great detail in the book as to how that joke came about and the different iterations of it. It had been, I wrote it in 1975, which is when I auditioned for the show, because the post office did announce that the following year, which was the bicentennial, they would be issuing a lot of bicentennial commemorative stamps. So there was a process, what would it be funny to commemorate, da-da-da-da. And that it's funny. That joke, when I go all over the country and I give keynote speeches, and whether it be corporations or fundraisers. But when I go to colleges and I tell my story, and I get up to that part of my career where I tell that joke, if there are like 18, 19-year-old kids in the audience, yeah, they'll laugh, but a lot of them will come up to me afterwards and go, well, why would you lick a stamp? Because the only stamps they know have that adhesive thing you peel off and you go. So the shelf life of that joke is shrinking rapidly,
I also don't know that kids these days know that it costs extra to lick a hooker.
I saw the combination of it is really, that joke is fucking doomed.
And that's what's so hip about it, is that it's it comes from somebody who's lived in New York City for a while, and that was the sensibility of the show. Is we're gonna get away with stuff you couldn't get away with in prime time, and it's gonna require you to step up your understanding of what's hip in New York right now.
Well, that was the one barometer, if you want to call it that we had was Lorne saying, let's just make each other laugh. And if we do that, we'll put that on television.
Right.
He assured us that there was an audience out there, by and large at the beginning probably baby boomers, that he felt wasn't being spoken to comedically on television, given what the standard fare was, especially in variety shows. Don't forget, you had Sonny and Cher, you had Carol Burnett.
Right.
You had all these shows where the host, Carol Burnett wore a Bob Mackie gown, and when Steve Lawrence came on as a guest, he had a tuxedo. And this was described as the off-Broadway version of what was the standard variety show.
Right.
And there was no cable at the time. There was not even Fox. It was ABC, NBC, CBS. That was television.
Yeah.
So to expand the boundaries had to be done deftly, but the parameters were expanded. Found out you could do more on the 10th show than you could on the first.
Yeah.
More on the 50th than you can do on the 10th.
Right. When you got the show, you had you had a manager named David Jonas, who was another guy at the Friars Club who was very good to me. He read my material. I still have, I wrote a memoir also, and I have letters from David Jonas in my book.
Oh, cool.
And I mention you in the book, of course. And so you were represented by him, and he was kind of the template for Woody Allen's Broadway Danny Rose. He was that kind of an agent.
Yeah, I mean, it was a natural, there's a point in your career when you're first starting, where you're looking for validation. You're looking for another person to make a phone call for you and to represent you. And since I was writing for most of his clients, who were stand-up guys in the Catskills, I gravitated toward him because he was always around, whether it be at the Catskills or local nightclubs where I had written for his guys. And I drifted in his direction, and he ultimately became my manager. And he indeed was the template, at least partly so, for Broadway Danny Rose. He was that guy. He was that guy that, he was the blue collar version. He hustled. He wore polyester. He wore a terrible wig that would spin around when, God forbid, there was wind. All of a sudden the part is over there instead of over here.
How do you have a wig and have dandruff at the same time?
I don't know. And the dandruff didn't move, but the hair did. I didn't understand that. And he spoke a mile a minute, and he was my manager when I got SNL. And I go into detail in the book that when the show started becoming, and he was very good to me, gave me a key to his office, because I lived with my parents on Long Island, and he gave me the key to the office to go there and hang out and work if I had meetings, but I needed a place to hang my hat between meetings. And 2 years, maybe 3 into the show, as sweet as he was the guy, just like it was in Danny Rose, he was the guy you started with and everybody left. Yeah. Okay? And
Freddie
Prinze did, and there were a couple of other people older than us. He claimed that he managed Woody Allen early on. I don't know if that's true, but he, when the show became the show, and meaning that it got traction and it was becoming a hit and it was making its imprimatur on the generation, I realized that I no longer wanted to be represented by a guy who's called the singing group Simon and Garfinkel, okay, or the English comedy troupe as Marty Python. Okay, I wanted somebody who was what would be the next step. And there were 2 guys you probably remember. One was Jack Rollins. He was Woody Allen's guy. Yeah. He found Nichols in May. Billy Crystal eventually went there, as did Robert Klein and Robin Williams. Okay, and then there was another guy named Bernie Brillstein. And he represented not only Lorne, but Belushi and Aykroyd went with him. Gilda went with him. Before them, Jim Henson.
The Muppets.
The Muppets. Jim Henson... Bernie went with Jim Henson all over while he had this suitcase filled with this folded felt in it, these puppets. And I went with him. Not only had my friends gone with him, but he was in LA, and I figured, I could stay in New York and still have an LA presence because he would be out there. Right. And I went but telling Dave Jonas that I was leaving was a very, very rough thing for me to do because he had been so nice to me.
Yeah, right. So I just want to do one of your other jokes because it's one of my favorites. You wrote one that says, and this was one you wrote for one of the Catskills guys, and he butchered it. They have a new thing now called sperm banks. It's like an ordinary bank, except here, after you make a deposit, you lose interest.
That joke I have now heard through the years from different comedians who say that they, different writers who claim that they wrote it. Other comedians.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's got a road company.
Got a lot of fingerprints on it.
A lot of fingerprints on it, but I wrote it for Freddie Roman, and it was. But it was once again. Freddie Roman called the house. I'm 21, just out of college, and he said, sperm banks, and I knew nothing about it. It's nothing that a 21-year-old kid, thinks about a lot. I wrote that for him, and then somebody heard him do that joke and said, "Who wrote that for you?" And he said, "Alan," gave them my number, and I got. I got this call that said, "Hey, I heard you write great sperm bank jokes." I'm going, "How did I become this guy?" Okay. Now I'm the sperm bank guy.
Yeah, right.
So like the second was something like, they're now freezing sperm, which could be a problem in the future because it's hard enough telling a kid he's been adopted. How do you tell him he's been defrosted? Okay. So that was another $7. So now it's up to 14.
That's great. Why are and you? I'm sure you've been asked this before, but I've tried to wrap my head around it. And Cliff Nesteroff, who I think you mentioned in your book, wrote the kind of quintessential book on the history of stand-up comedy. And,
I agree.
And he tries to track it, but why do you think that Jews have kind of cornered the market on comedy in America and have had a lock on it since the turn of the century?
It's an often asked question. It's a debatable one. The best I can do, and this is nothing profound, other than I think it's part of the culture. I think that the sense of humor is a coping mechanism. If you got a oppressed society of any kind, and God knows the Jews have been oppressed, it's a way of coping. It's what are your choices? Look what Tevye does in right before they're ready to leave Anatevka, right after the pogrom. It's something that what are your choices? And there's this documentary that came out, I want to say 3 years ago. Okay, it's called The Last Laugh. Are you familiar with it?
No, I'm writing that down.
I urge you to see it. And yeah, there's a bunch of us who are in it. I'm in it, Rob Reiner and Mel Brooks and Sarah Silverman. There's a bunch of people in it. I think Larry David's in it. And basically, it's about humor and the Holocaust. Two words you don't hear in the same sentence a lot. And it's how far you could go in terms of humor. So Mel Brooks said, well, when he did The Producers, he went as far as Hitler, but he didn't do the Holocaust, okay?
Right.
So yeah, you have all these commentaries, but at the heart of this documentary, they follow the story of a woman named Naomi something. She was 92 or 93, Auschwitz survivor. And you see her, she's the spine of this documentary, and she tells you that you needed a sense of humor to survive the camps in order to get by. And at the end of this documentary, she says, if Hitler could see me now, I would have the last laugh, hence the title, The Last Laugh. And I think if you see it, it will give a clearer indication as to why that's part of this culture. It's not the whole answer, mind you,
right.
But I do think that, from the Second Street theaters and everything that happened downtown when the immigrants came over and settled on the Lower East Side, and you had the Yiddish theater, which was a thriving thing, and then if you date back to Europe, you had Shalom Aleichem, you had these writers. It was all about survival.
Right.
It was all about punching up. You look at the Python guys. They all went to these very, very heavy Catholic schools, and they made fun of the Queen. It was about punching up, you know what I mean? And that's basically very much part of what satire is, and I think that's a huge part of it.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And it seems like the Yiddish language is just funny. They're funny words. There's there's an element of humor built into the language.
I think that it's embedded in it. I think absolutely right. The ch.
Yeah, right.
It's
schmuck. They sound funny. They're funny words.
Well, we wrote the joke for 700 Sundays that where Billy talks about his relatives who came over and spoke mostly Yiddish, which is a language which is a combination of Hebrew and phlegm, okay? So
that's funny.
So it's I remember my grandparents. I remember, there was always something about, even when it wasn't ha ha funny, it was about how do you deal with problems. Oh God, here's another thing that I need this in my life.
Yeah, right,
Great.
right.
You know what I mean? So there's an attitude.
Yeah, which became the New York attitude. It pervaded into like very much the comedians that come out of New York City are kvetchers. They're complainers, right? I mean, I think it was because so many comedians were Jewish then, and that became a way, I think, of dealing with the crowdedness, the stress, the danger of living in New York City was, to complain about it. I guess that same dynamic that Jews were doing.
I think you're right. I remember even later on, even when I started hanging out at the clubs, I remember there was a comedian named Mike Preminger.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Do you remember Mike, who had a joke about Central Park being a very safe place to be at night if you're a bullet? Okay. And you think about it, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's getting a laugh out of what is ordinarily a dire situation.
Right. All right, so getting back to SNL, and I'm not going to keep you too long. I don't know what your time frame is, but I'm not going to.
I got the rest of my life. There's a pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. What are you doing during the pandemic? I see you're doing a lot of press for the book, but what's a day in the life for you? Are you in Manhattan?
No, I'm in Jersey. I'm right across the river. We sold our home in Jersey. Robin and I got this glorious apartment. New York is right there. It was this great view of the Statue of Liberty, the New York skyline, and the George Washington Bridge is up that way. So it's pretty fantastic. But
isn't that where Len Cariou is living?
Len Cariou lives about three towns over in Gutenberg. Okay.
Got it.
And we, my days are pretty much the same. I wake up 5:30 to start my work. And I go as long as there's some gas in the tank. Sometimes that goes until 3, 4 in the afternoon.
Really?
Other times by 6:30 in the morning. Yeah, sometimes by 6:30 in the morning I'm going, I don't have it today. Oh, God, nobody's up yet. It's 6:30. What am I going to do today? Yeah, no, I'm pretty disciplined that way.
That's amazing. So you get up, you have a cup of coffee, and you just sit down and write.
Yeah, I know what I'm going to write. I've got these projects. The movie we just did with Billy, that took 3.5 years to write, and it was long distance, and it was writing scenes, sending it back and forth. But I'm writing a script now with Barry Levinson, and I've got a TV deal where I'm going to adapt a book by Barry Sonnenfeld called Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother.
Oh, I read it. Yeah, I just had him on the show.
Barry's the greatest, right?
Yeah, he's the greatest.
Really fun. So I'm adapting that book. So I'm working with Barry and Rob Reiner, who, is I think he engineered the whole deal. And so I've got stuff to do. So
you're going to have a great scene in there when he's at Madison Square Garden. Was it a Hendrix concert where his mother calls him?
It was like 2:00 in the morning, and it was Hendrix and his band of gypsies.
Yeah.
It's 2:00 in the morning, and all of a sudden on the loudspeaker, Hendrix is warming up, and you hear on the PA, Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother. And he gets up, he figures his father's dead because he had been sick or something, and he makes his way to a payphone, and he's crying at this point, and his mother says, he goes, Mom, is Dad, what's about that? He said, your father's fine, he's sleeping. He says, why do you call? She says, you said you'd be home by 1, it's now 2:15. Madison Square Garden.
She called Madison Square Garden.
Well, and somehow someone said, call your mother.
That's great. All right, that's a good prize. Now, you've been working for, 35 years?
No, SNL started 45 years ago,
45,
and there was 2 years in the Catskills before that. So I think it's about 47-ish years, yeah.
Have you ever had a period where you had nothing to write, and did you ever have a year where you just kind of, and did you enjoy that time, or was that a stressful time?
It was stressful. It's stressful. You go, oh my God, am I dry? Or, oh my God, what do I have anything new to say? Or I have something new to say, but does anybody want to hear it? I think every writer goes through that. I think one of the cool things about being prolific and to staying at it is if you keep generating pages, even if it stinks, okay, and most first drafts aren't very good and this and that. Now, that was part of the training that was in that came along with live TV. Nothing was that precious that it couldn't be tweaked, that it couldn't be rewritten. And it had to be done when there's a certain adrenaline flow because an audience is coming in. You've got that in the theater and you've got that, in television. Not so much in the movies, but yeah, if you're going to shoot a scene, you want to make sure the night before that this is the best way that scene could be. And you can always rewrite it on the set. But live television trains you to do that. And it's the best sort of breeding, if you will. But that all being said, when you're writing alone and you don't have a deadline as such, you don't have an audience coming in, it's just like being in college. If the first day in September they say, okay, the term paper is due the day before Christmas break, we all know that we don't start doing it until, in December sometime. Same thing with, the movie script, either this script or that script. If anything's to be done, the cramming thing, I just trained myself to know, let me try to generate pages every day, even if they suck, because maybe I had to do these bad ones in order to find the good ones,
Yeah, I've heard, that's so interesting, because it does seem like a lot of great writers say just barf out that first draft, just get it on paper, because writing is really about rewriting.
Well, Gilda Radner used to call it the vomit draft, where you just vomit out everything and then you start picking out the corn. As you can see, she was very poetic. There was like an Emily Dickinson thing there.
Yeah.
But he was right.
Yeah, right. So how much of the stuff over the years have you done because you had an idea, like you said, I have something to say, and then you put it on paper and then you sell it, versus people coming to you and saying, we have an idea, we think you can execute it for us?
I couldn't say percentage-wise which was which. I mean, Barry Sonnenfeld wrote Barry Sonnenfeld, Call Your Mother, and they asked me to adapt it. Billy Crystal said, I have this idea, 700 Sundays. So there was those were incidents where people came to me either with a property or an idea. But there's also been ideas that I've had of my own where I wrote something and had the liberty and the luck after Gilda passed, I wrote a book called Bunny Bunny, which was a tribute to her.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it was an instinct that I had that was actually suggested by my wife, Robin. Gilda had died a few years earlier, and she said, your best friend died, you haven't cried yet. So there I had an idea, and I followed it. I've written other books, a children's book called Our Tree Named Steve, which was my own doing. It's a very big selling book through the years for children. So I can't give you a percentage, all right?
Right.
But as to how much was original, how much was somebody coming. But at the same time, I think that there's a flexibility in wanting to write something that somebody comes to you with, especially if you're going to do it with them. It's social, as you know, as opposed to cloistering yourself in a room, filling up these 119 pages by yourself. You go, all right, I got a partner. That's why lately, with the exception of this book, Laugh Lines, which of course I did by myself, it's my story, I had written a few books with Dave Barry, this Pulitzer Prize winning humorist from Florida, because we both had our own projects where we wrote alone.
Yeah.
Okay? But this gave us something to do together. It was fun. We wrote a novel together called Lunatics, which did very well. We came up with a story. We played two different characters who had a feud. And we said, all right, let's see how this local feud escalates. All right? And who knows, maybe there's a new pope as a result, okay?
Yeah.
And so he was one guy, I was the other. We alternated chapters. We were never in the same room together.
Yeah,
so what I'm saying is I'd write a 3 or 4 page chapter, send it to him, then he would send me back his chapter, and we built on it. We both had other things to do.
Right.
But this was this was a collaboration, even though we weren't in the same room. It's a diversion.
Yeah.
And it's the alchemy, once again, the synergy, where 1 and 1 equals 3.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, you've had a life that anybody would envy, and to be 50 years into it and have projects going on, and to be as excited about those projects as you, like, just to see you light up in talking about the Barry Sonnenfeld book. What a gift to have spent your life doing something that gets you excited, where you're using your brain, where you're collaborating. And it's just, people go, when are you going to retire? From what? Why would I stop doing this?
Well, yeah, and people retire to write books. Well, I'm doing that anyway,
Right.
And the fact is, when Billy and I were shooting this movie here today with he and Tiffany Haddish, when we were in pre-production, there were offices downtown in New York. He's got an apartment there. I drove from Jersey. I would drop him off at his apartment on my way back to Jersey. And we said almost every day, Greg, we would say, look what they're still letting us do. I'm 70. I just turned 70 in May.
Yeah.
Billy's a couple of years older than me. Look what we're still doing.
Right.
And like he wrote in the foreword to my book, we started out in a car, and he was fun about it. He says, now we were in a car again, except this time Alan was driving. But the fact of the matter was, it's, very lucky, lucky, very appreciative of the opportunity to keep doing this.
Well, the world is lucky to have you. You've brought a lot of joy to people. You've brought a lot of laughs and inspiration, and you've been good to people that have come along. And you've mentored, and you've been nice enough to give interviews and all this stuff that you do. So can we keep in touch? I
was going to just ask you that. Do we have each other's info?
I'm going to stop. Well, let me finish the interview, and then after I stop record, then we'll get each other's info.
Okay.
So anyway, once again, people, get the book. I cannot recommend it enough. It is such a fun ride, and it's called Laugh Lines: My Life Helping Funny People to Be Funnier. And it was just released on audio as well. Did you do the audio?
I did the audio, and Billy read the foreword.
Oh, very nice. So pick it up, and that'll do it. Thank you so much for your time. I love you.
Love you too.
Okay. Wow, that took you a while. You thought about it. You thought about it.
I thought somebody came into the room. I forgot it was me.
I was being so vulnerable. I was
no, you're fine.
Should I tell him I love him? I don't know if I should tell him I love him.
Okay, the same and double, okay?
All right, beautiful.